Mother dying last year. Mother and father dying.
Nobody had to die. That is the thing that sits with you when you actually think about it. The show did not require Henry Blake's death. It was not written into the original concept. It was not foreshadowed across 3 seasons. It was not the inevitable conclusion of anything the story had been building toward. The writers made a choice. A specific, deliberate, irreversible choice. And they made it in secret, hiding it from the cast until the moment the cameras rolled, so that the grief on screen would be real grief, unmanaged and unperformed. They killed a beloved character who was going home, who had been discharged, who had survived, and they did it in the last 60 seconds of a season finale, in a single announcement read aloud by a young man whose voice barely held together, and then they cut to black. No funeral, no farewell scene, no chance for anyone to say goodbye properly. The question that has never been fully answered is why? Why Henry specifically? Why that moment? Why that method? And the longer you sit with those questions, the more the answer reveals something about the show, about the character, and about what MASH was actually trying to say that it could not say any other way. The answer has been hiding in plain sight since 1975, and most people have been looking past it for 50 years. Consider what it took to make that decision. Somewhere in the MASH writers' room, someone first proposed killing a main character who was on his way home. That proposal had to survive a room full of people who understood what it would cost. Who knew the other cast members would be genuinely affected by what was being planned? Who understood that American television audiences had certain expectations and that what they were proposing violated most of them? They said yes anyway.
One hell of a human being.
I got it.
No, we're past that part. Now we're up to one hell of a human being.
And that decision held, and nobody leaked it. Let's start not with Henry's death, but with Henry's life. Specifically, with what kind of commanding officer he actually was. Because there is a version of Henry Blake that the show presents on the surface, and there is a version that exists underneath it, and they are not quite the same person. On the surface, Henry Blake is warm, bumbling, and broadly ineffective as a military authority figure. He signs whatever radar puts in front of him, gets outmaneuvered constantly, and enforces regulations only when convenient. The accidental commander, the man Korea got because someone had to go. That version of Henry is real, and it is also incomplete. Before we go any further, leave a comment and tell us how old you were when you first saw the episode where Henry dies. Because I think the age at which that moment hits you determines everything about how you understand it. For some people it was just a shocking television moment. For others it was the first time a piece of entertainment made them feel something they were not prepared for. That distinction matters, and I think it connects directly to what the writers were actually doing. Here is what most analysis of Henry Blake misses entirely. Henry Blake is the only character in the original MASH lineup who is genuinely trying to go home. Hawkeye is angry, but he processes that anger through humor and medicine. Trapper is restless, but he channels it into schemes and pranks and a kind of aggressive sociability. Frank Burns is invested in the institutional structure around him. Margaret is building a career. Radar has found a role that fits him so precisely, it is almost as if the army invented the position for him specifically. Henry just wants to go home, not as a background detail, as the organizing principle of his entire character. The same man who arrived in Korea, unchanged by it, undeeped by it, just more tired, just more eager to leave. This is worth sitting with, because in a show about people trying to survive a war, Henry Blake is the purest version of that survival. He is not trying to find meaning in the experience. He is not trying to win anything or prove anything or change anything. He is enduring, marking time, waiting for the world to return him to himself. If you want more deep dives into MASH characters like this one, subscribing takes about 2 seconds. We go this deep regularly, and the upcoming ones are going to reveal things about this show that most people have watched right past for decades.
I gotta go to the toilet is how I'm doing.
Now here is the first discovery that reframes everything. Henry Blake is a good doctor. The show tells you this early and demonstrates it, periodically throughout his 3 seasons. In the operating room, the bumbling disappears. The uncertainty disappears. He becomes competent and focused and genuinely skilled in a way that the comic framing of his character never fully acknowledges. There is a specific quality to Henry in surgery that is different from his quality everywhere else in the camp. A stillness, a seriousness, as if the OR is the only place in Korea where he knows with complete confidence who he is and what he is supposed to be doing. That detail becomes more important as you map what it reveals about him. Henry Blake did not choose to be a soldier. He chose to be a doctor. The army is an interruption. Medicine is the continuity. In the OR, the bumbling disappears entirely. That is the real Henry Blake. That distinction between Henry the reluctant soldier and Henry the committed doctor is the key to understanding why his death lands the way it does, and it is also the key to understanding why the writers made the choice they made. Here is the contradiction at the center of Henry Blake that the show never resolves, because it cannot be resolved. Henry is a good person in a system that does not particularly reward goodness. He is kind when the institution asks for hardness. He is flexible when the regulations demand rigidity.
We had the whole thing had it made for you, Dennis, so...
The tie is silk.
He bends rules not out of negligence, but out of a genuine, if often unarticulated, understanding that the rules exist to serve people, and when the rules stop serving people, they lose their authority. He is, in this specific sense, more morally sophisticated than he appears. The bumbling is real. The goodness underneath it is also real. And the show uses the bumbling so consistently as comedy that most viewers never fully register the goodness as anything more than background warmth. But it is there. Watch Henry in the moments that cost him something, when he has to deliver bad news, when he has to absorb someone's grief, when he is sitting with a patient who is not going to make it, and the medicine has run out, and all that is left is presence. In those moments, Henry Blake is not bumbling. He is not comic. He is a man who has shown up as completely as he knows how for another person's worst moment. That is who Henry Blake actually is. And that is who the show killed. Now here is something the production history of the episode reveals that most MASH fans know but few have fully thought through. The cast did not know Henry was going to die. The script for the season 3 finale kept the ending secret. McLean Stevenson, who played Henry, knew he was leaving the show. The character's departure had been written as a discharge, a happy ending, a return to the life Henry had been waiting to return to. What nobody except the writers and producers knew was what came after that discharge. When Gary Burkhoff walked into that operating room and read the news of Henry's death, the shock on the faces of the other actors was real. They were not performing grief. They had just learned, in the middle of a take, that a character they had lived with for 3 years was gone. The tears you see in that scene are the tears of people who did not know they were about to cry. The writers made a deliberate decision to weaponize the cast's emotional truth, to use real grief as the raw material for televised grief. And in doing so, they created one of the most genuinely affecting moments in American television history. But why? Why go to those lengths? Why not write Henry a proper farewell? Why not give the audience and the cast the closure that the situation seemed to call for? The answer is not about dramatic effectiveness, though the moment is dramatically effective beyond almost anything else the show produced. The answer is about what MASH was actually trying to say. Here is the realization that changes the way you understand the entire 3 seasons Henry is present for. MASH was not primarily a comedy. It was a show about the absurdity of war that used comedy as a delivery mechanism, the way a bitter pill uses sugarcoating. The laughter was real. The medicine underneath the laughter was also real, and the medicine was this: war is random, indifferent, and does not care about your narrative. It does not respect your happy ending. It does not honor your discharge papers. It does not pause while you make your peace and say your goodbyes. Henry Blake had done everything right. He had served his time. He had been discharged. The story of his war was over, and the story of his return was supposed to begin, and then it didn't. And there was nothing anyone could do about it. No one to complain to, no regulation to invoke, no commanding officer to appeal to. The war simply continued past the point where it was supposed to stop mattering to Henry Blake.
Mr. Dr. Henry Blake.
And he was in a plane over the Sea of Japan, and that was the end. That is not a dramatic device. That is an argument. The writers were making a statement about what war actually does, and Henry Blake was the vehicle for that statement because Henry Blake was the character who most purely represented the dream of getting out intact. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. If the war could reach past his discharge and take him anyway, then nobody in that camp was ever truly safe. And that feeling, that understanding, was what the show needed the audience to carry with them into Season 4. Watch the Season 4 premiere. The camp is different. Not just because Henry is gone, because something has been permanently removed from the 4077th that the arrival of Sherman Potter, good as he is, cannot fully replace. A kind of innocence, a belief that decency and luck and the natural order of things would see the good people home. Henry's death did not just kill Henry, it killed the version of the show where the war had a kind ceiling on what it was willing to take. Here is something that happened after the episode aired that is almost never mentioned in discussions of Henry Blake's death, and it changes the scale of what the moment actually meant. CBS received thousands of letters, not dozens, thousands. Angry letters, grieving letters, letters from viewers who felt that something had been done to them that exceeded the normal contract between a television show and its audience. People wrote in to say they cried, that they could not sleep afterward, that they had explained to their children why a fictional character's death had made them so genuinely sad and had found themselves unable to explain it adequately. Veterans wrote in, "This is the part that matters most." Men who had served in Korea or in other wars, who watched that scene and recognized something in it that most of the television audience could only feel rather than name. A specific quality of loss, the way news arrived in a war zone, not with ceremony or preparation or the softening scaffolding of a proper death scene, just a piece of paper, just a voice that barely held together, just information delivered in the middle of whatever else was happening that permanently changed the shape of everything after it.
Attention! We're drumming you out of the military.
The veterans recognized that. They wrote in to say they recognized it, and what they were recognizing was not a television moment. They were recognizing a truth about what war does to the people inside it, rendered so precisely that 50 years later it has not become less precise. That is what Henry Blake's death accomplished that no other moment in the show's 11-year run accomplished in quite the same way. It crossed from entertainment into testimony. Here is what those letters also revealed, and it is something the writers could not have fully anticipated. The response was not just about grief. A significant portion of the letters expressed something closer to anger, not at the writers for making a bold artistic choice. Anger at the war, real anger, displaced from a fictional event onto the actual political context of the early 1970s, when Vietnam was still ongoing and the country was in the middle of a painful argument about what that war had cost. Henry Blake died in a Korean war drama, and people wrote angry letters about Vietnam. That displacement is not an accident. It is the measure of how precisely the scene had located something true about what wars take from people, regardless of which war it is. The writers had aimed at something real and hit it so squarely that the audience could not contain the reaction within the frame of fiction. That is exceedingly rare, and Henry Blake was the reason it was possible. Here is the relationship the show used most consistently to make Henry Blake sympathetic, and what it reveals about him that the comedy usually conceals. Henry and Hawkeye, the commanding officer and his most persistent antagonist. The relationship runs across 3 seasons as a kind of elaborate negotiation, with Hawkeye constantly pushing against Henry's authority and Henry constantly bending rather than breaking, because breaking would require a confrontational capacity that Henry does not particularly possess, and because somewhere beneath the authority and the exasperation, Henry genuinely likes Hawkeye in a way he cannot quite justify professionally. Most viewers read this dynamic as comedy, the straight-laced superior and the irreverent subordinate, the butt of the joke and the joke maker, and that reading is accurate as far as it goes. But watch what happens in the scenes where the comedy drops away and something more unguarded is operating. There are moments across those 3 seasons where Henry looks at Hawkeye with an expression that is not exasperation and not amusement, but something closer to envy. Hawkeye is capable of expressing everything Henry is suppressing: the anger, the grief, the absurdity, the outrage. Hawkeye says the things about the war that Henry cannot say because Henry is the commanding officer, and commanding officers do not get to express outrage without undermining the structure that keeps the place functioning. So Henry lets Hawkeye do it for him, not cynically, not manipulatively. He lets Hawkeye be the voice of everything Henry cannot say, and in return, he gives Hawkeye the latitude to say it. The rule bending is not just kindness, it is a transaction. Henry permits Hawkeye's rebellion because Hawkeye's rebellion is also, in some quiet and unacknowledged way, Henry's rebellion. Conducted at a safe remove. Protected by the comedy framing that keeps everyone from having to confront how serious the feeling underneath actually is. That is the most sophisticated thing about Henry Blake, and it is buried so completely under the surface texture of the character that most people who watched the show for years never consciously noticed it. He was smarter than the show gave him credit for. He was more aware than the bumbling suggested. He had found a way to survive in an institution that was never designed for people like him.
Hey, you know how I am.
Well, anyway.
By deputizing someone who was better at surviving than he was, and then he was discharged, and then his plane went down, and nobody got to tell him that they understood what he had been doing all along. Here is the thing about McLean Stevenson that makes the story more complicated and more human than the television mythology around it suggests. Stevenson chose to leave MASH. This is sometimes forgotten in the retrospective framing of Henry's death as a tragedy visited upon everyone involved. Stevenson had decided that the show was limiting him, that his career would expand more readily without the constraint of a long-running ensemble. He wanted to be a star in his own right, wanted to headline projects that had his name above the title, and believed that MASH, for all its success, was holding him in place. What happened next is one of the more honest cautionary tales Hollywood has produced. The projects came, they did not stick. The pilots were picked up and cancelled. The solo work did not generate the audience that MASH had built around Henry Blake. Stevenson spent the years after his departure doing competent work in diminishing contexts, never quite finding the thing he had left to find. He died in 1996 at the age of 68, and the role he is most remembered for is the one he walked away from. There is a specific kind of irony in that. A man who left because he wanted more than a supporting role in an ensemble, and who is remembered most clearly for the moment when that ensemble mourned his loss. But here is the thing. Stevenson's choice to leave does not diminish what the writers did with his departure.
Here. Lorraine? Lorraine? We got cut off.
If anything, it deepens it. Because the writers took a personnel decision, an actor leaving for professional reasons, and turned it into a moral argument. They took something that was fundamentally about the ego and ambition and practical calculations of the entertainment industry and transformed it into a statement about the randomness of death and the cruelty of war. That transformation is one of the most quietly extraordinary acts of creative repurposing in television history. And it only works because of who Henry Blake was. Here is the scene that most people who love this episode never talk about, because it is not in the episode itself. It is in every episode that follows. Henry Blake is never mentioned again, not formally, not with ceremony, not with the kind of sustained acknowledgement that the loss of a man that important to the 4077th would seem to require. He is mourned in the premiere of season 4, and then the show moves on, the way the show always moves on, because the war moves on, and the patients keep coming, and the camp cannot stop to grieve properly, because proper grief requires time, and time is the one thing a surgical unit in an active combat zone is never given. And this is the final thing the writers understood, perhaps more clearly than they are usually credited for understanding. That the most honest thing they could do with Henry's death was not to dwell on it, not to give it the weight that television grief usually gives its dramatic losses, but to let it be swallowed by the ongoing noise and work and survival of the 4077th, the way real deaths in real wars are swallowed, the way the people who knew the people who died have to keep functioning because stopping is not an option. There is a man in the camp. His name is written on the duty roster. He has a bunk and a coffee mug and particular habits the other people in the camp have long since organized their daily life around. And then one day there is an announcement.
I'm really gonna miss you guys. I mean that. I'm really gonna miss you.
And the man is gone, and the roster continues, and the coffee mug is still there for a while, and then it isn't. And the war continues, and the patients continue, and the loss sits in the background of everything without ever quite being named. That is what Henry Blake's death actually looks like from the inside of the 4077th. And the show, to its enormous credit, does not flinch from that. It does not give the grief more room than it would actually have. It gives it exactly as much room as the war allows, which is not very much, which is honestly the whole point. There is one more thing, and it is the thing that makes the episode impossible to fully process on first viewing, because it requires knowing something that first-time viewers, by definition, cannot know. Radar O'Reilly delivers the news. Radar. Not Hawkeye, who was Henry's most complicated relationship in the camp. Not Potter, who had not yet arrived. Not anyone with authority or gravitas or a particular claim to the moment. Radar, the young company clerk who heard helicopters before anyone else and who understood the emotional temperature of the 4077th more precisely than any other person in it, who was in some ways Henry's most devoted shadow, walks into the operating room with a piece of paper and reads it in a voice that is barely staying together. That choice is deliberate. Radar is the one who delivers the news of Henry's death because Radar is the one who loved Henry most simply. Not with complexity or ambivalence or the mixture of affection and frustration that characterized Hawkeye's relationship with him. Radar loved Henry the way a son loves a father who is imperfect and kind and trying his best in a situation he was never designed for. And putting that news in Radar's mouth, making Radar the one who has to say it out loud, is the cruelest and most precise choice the writers made in an episode full of cruel and precise choices. Because Radar can hear things before they happen. Everyone in the camp knows this. Everyone has seen it, and he did not hear this coming. He did not know. He walked into that room with a piece of paper, and he found out at the same moment everyone else did, and the look on his face is the look of a person whose gift just failed them at the worst possible moment. He could hear helicopters from miles away. He could not hear this. Henry Blake had to die because the show needed to mean something it could not mean while Henry was alive. It needed to say clearly and without the possibility of misreading that the war did not have a flaw. That the good and the kind and the eager to go home were not protected by their goodness or their kindness or their eagerness. That surviving Korea was not something you earned. It was something that happened to you or it wasn't, and the distance between those two outcomes was not a moral measurement. Henry Blake was the kindest commanding officer the 4077th would ever have. He bent every rule on behalf of the people under his command. He signed the papers Radar put in front of him and looked the other way at the still and let Hawkeye and Trapper run their schemes and never used his authority as a weapon because he understood, without being able to articulate it precisely, that authority used as a weapon in a place like this destroyed the thing it was supposed to protect. He was good at being a person in a way that he was never quite good at being a colonel, and the war did not care about the distinction. His plane went down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. The coffee mug sat on the desk for a while, and the 4077th went on. If there is a story or a character you want us to look at next, leave it in the comments. We read everyone.